After selling my own Yonge-Eglinton condo and helping dozens of other owners through theirs, here's what I've learned. While you're focused on pricing and staging, those matter, no question, there are 5 process blind spots that can quietly derail your sale. Most owners don't see them coming until it's too late. I've put together a free guide called the Status Certificate Decoder. It shows you how to read your building's financials the way a buyer's lawyer would. Links in the description. Here's what you need to know. Most condo owners kind of treat the status certificate like it's buyer's paperwork, like it's something that you order after you get an offer just to make everything feel official. And I get it, that's how it's usually framed. That's backwards. The status certificate is your building's truth serum, and you want to know what it says before the first buyer walks through your door. Here's why. When problems surface during the conditional period, you're negotiating from a point of weakness. The buyer has already fallen in love with the place, they've made their offer, and now they're discovering issues that they didn't budget for or they weren't aware of. You're the motivated seller with a deadline. They hold most of the cards. So the move is to have your agent order your status certificate a bit more than, let's call it 2 weeks before you list, not after you get an offer. Condo corporations have 10 days to provide it, but if there are problems, special assessments, underfunded reserves, lawsuits, building issues, those can take some time to factor into your pricing strategy or deal with it at all. I'll be honest, this is a little bit embarrassing to admit. When we sold our own Yonge-Eglinton condo in the fall of 2023, I made this exact mistake. The market was declining. I figured it would take a while to sell. And so I didn't order the status certificate early, primarily because I was doing a lot of hand wringing about if we should even list at that time at all. Thank God we did in hindsight. Anyway, we got an offer faster than I expected. And during the conditional period, the certificate came back showing that the building had Kitech plumbing. At that time, no one knew about this except for property management and the condo board. We ended up taking a further $5,000 price reduction because I was negotiating from a point of weakness instead of having that information up front to price around it. So what that means for you is pretty straightforward. Don't let buyer's counsel be the first person to discover your building's problems. Get that information early, factor it into your list price, control the narrative instead of reacting to it. And that's just the first document you need to understand, but there's a number inside the status certificate that can sync your deal even faster. Most owners assume a big reserve fund balance means a healthy building. I understand why, it sounds right, but that's not really how buyers look at it. The reserve fund tells you a lot, more than most people realize. It's actually a math problem. The thing about reserve funds is buyers aren't looking at the balance in isolation, or at least they shouldn't be. They're looking at the plan. They're buying into your building's financial future, monthly costs over 25, 30 years. And a reserve fund study that recommends big contribution increases or shows a history of special assessments makes buyers fairly nervous. And at a certain point, it makes them walk. Here's some context. A Condominium Authority of Ontario survey of 724 condo corporations found that 64% had reserve fund studies recommending contribution increases over 3%, and 16% issued special assessments between 2018 and 2023, averaging somewhere between $2,900 and $3,700 per unit, roughly. If your building fits either of those categories, buyers need to see a credible funding plan before they're comfortable committing. Think of it this way. The reserve fund is more like a renovation budget than a savings account. Buyers want to know, is there enough money for the next 10 years of major repairs, and is the building actually committed to funding it? A $2 million reserve fund sounds impressive until you realize that the building needs $5 million in elevator and HVAC work over the next 5 years. The balance isn't really the point. So before you list, check when the building's last reserve fund study was done and what it recommended. If it's more than 3 years old, or if it shows funding gaps, factor that into your pricing, and hopefully you've hired an agent who can be ready to walk a buyer through that plan. The sellers who handle this well aren't the ones with perfect buildings, they're the ones who got ahead of the conversation instead of reacting to it. Even if your reserve fund looks solid, there's something else that's fairly quietly shrinking your buyer pool before they even book a showing. Maintenance fee creep, kind of the silent mortgage that erodes your buyer pool without anyone ever really talking about it. Toronto's 2023 average is around 86 cents per square foot across central core condos, according to a study done by Urbanation. I unfortunately haven't done one in the past couple of years. For a 700 square foot unit, that's roughly $602 a month. Most sellers look at that number and think, okay, that's manageable. But here's what they miss. The federal lending rules, CMHC and OSFI, require lenders to count 50% of a buyer's condo fee against what they can borrow. So that $602 a month in fees is, depending on current rates, reducing your buyer's purchasing power by somewhere in the range of $55,000 to $65,000. So when buyers say that your condo feels expensive, they usually don't mean the finishes or the floor plan, they mean the monthly burn. Fees over $600 a month eliminate a fairly significant chunk of qualified buyers before they ever seriously consider your unit. And if you're the type of person who runs the numbers before making big decisions, I have a feeling that you are, you wouldn't be here if you weren't, this is the calculation most sellers skip entirely. The list price gets the attention, the monthly carrying cost determines who can actually afford to buy. I'll just say it. Fees over $700 a month are a real headwind unless your place is big and people are expecting relatively high fees. At that point, you're not competing on location or finishes anymore. You're competing on affordability math. Now, here's what most sellers don't realize, and this connects back to the status certificate package we talked about earlier. The financial documents that come with it will actually show you whether fees are set to go up. You're looking at the current budget and the reserve fund contribution schedule. If the corporation is increasing what it's pulling into reserves, that flows through to maintenance fees. And if it's fairly obvious the operating budget isn't covering what costs to run the building anymore, a fee increase is just kind of a matter of time. Buyers who are paying attention will see that, so you want to see it first. And the sellers who figure all this out early can at least price with their eyes open, which puts them in a much better position than the ones who find out from the buyer feedback after 2 months of being on the market. Now, there's one asset most Yonge-Eglinton owners are undervaluing by dozens of thousands of dollars, and it has nothing to do with square footage. Most owners assume their parking spot adds the same value regardless of how they own it. That's not quite right. Parking only adds real value when title backs it up, and there's a fairly meaningful difference between owning a deeded parking space and having exclusive use of one. Here's the thing. Buyers want assets they can mortgage, sell separately, or pass on. Exclusive use parking kind of feels like long-term rental agreements. Deeded parking feels like real estate, and the premium reflects that difference in security. Recent Yonge-Eglinton parking only listings have ranged from $45,000 to $80,000. Analysis of the broader GTA by Wahi shows condos with parking sell roughly 2.5 weeks faster, with meaningful premiums across a number of neighborhoods. But, and this is the part that matters, that's only if the parking is actually owned, not just assigned. I'd think of exclusive use parking as phantom equity. It looks valuable on paper until a buyer's lawyer digs into the details. If your parking is exclusive use only, factor that into your pricing expectations. If it's deeded, it should be prominent in your marketing because it genuinely changes the math for a buyer. So, check your property deed and your status certificate. Does your parking show up as a separate PIN? Is it described as owned or exclusive use? This isn't a small detail, it's a pricing decision, and knowing which one you have going in means you're not getting surprised by it during negotiations. Even if you've got all this sorted, there's one reality at Yonge-Eglinton specifically that changes how you have to think about positioning your unit. By the way, all of this is exactly what I put together in the status certificate decoder. It walks you through reading these financial details the way a buyer's lawyer would, so you can spot the problems before they do. Link is in the description. Competition density at Yonge-Eglinton. The thing about this neighborhood is you're not just fighting the market, you're fighting comparison tabs. Right now, there are 24 active listings specifically in the Yonge-Eglinton defined area with an average of about 41 days on market. In a broader area that I consider what encapsulates Yonge-Eglinton, that number jumps to 179 active listings. And some buildings have multiple competing units. I've seen buildings with 6 units for sale in the building at the same time. I've seen 18 in newer buildings. In a dense condo node like this, location doesn't differentiate you. Every unit has subway access. Every unit has the same convenience factor. Buyers are literally opening tabs and comparing nearly identical layouts in the same building side by side. You can't research your way out of this. While you're comparing finishes and optimizing your listing photos, 3 other identical units just dropped their price. The window for perfect positioning closes very fast. At Yonge-Eglinton, nice unit is not a strategy. Location gets you into the search results, but pricing and presentation have to be on point to get shortlisted. And here's why this matters for everything we've covered. competition density amplifies all of it. Status certificate issues, reserve fund gaps, maintenance fee creep, parking confusion. Every one of those blind spots gets bigger when buyers have 6 other tabs open and can immediately compare you against something else. And that's kind of the reality of selling in a dense condo node. Every process blind spot gets bigger when buyers have immediate options. The difference between successful sale and months of sitting on the market, for the most part, is not about timing the market perfectly. It's about controlling the process details that most sellers only figure out when it's too late. And to be fair, bad market timing can hurt you too. I'm not saying that the market doesn't matter, but the sellers that I see really struggling, in a lot of cases, it's a process problem, not a timing problem. The status certificate decoder walks you through reading your building's financials the way a buyer's lawyer would, so that you can control the narrative instead of reacting to surprises. The link is in the description. Now, most Toronto condo owners think waiting for better market conditions is the safe play. They're watching for rate drops or inventory shifts, seasonal patterns. But the sellers who end up regretting their decisions weren't wrong about market timing. They were wrong about something way more expensive. And that's exactly what I get into in the hidden cost of waiting. Toronto condo owners are missing this right here.